Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the 2014 Critical Issues Symposium of Hope College. I'm John Knapp, president of the college, and it is a pleasure to extend a special welcome this evening to our friends from the community who've joined us, but always good to see a large turnout of students for an event this important to our college. The Critical Issues Symposium goes back to 1980. It's a real tradition of the college and one that we're especially proud of because it's emblematic, I think, of our commitment to the liberal arts. This is an opportunity not just to learn about an issue, and technology and the future of being human is indeed an important issue for discussion, but it's also an opportunity for us as a college to practice the liberal arts, to practice critical thinking, to look at critical issues from the lenses of multiple disciplines. And this is an opportunity not only to have that conversation over the next day, but to actually begin a conversation on this topic that we intend to continue throughout the academic year. In fact, in November at the Presidential Colloquium, we'll have an opportunity to convene once again and to think about some of the revolutionary trends, including trends in technology, that are reshaping our society and how those trends will impinge on our own lives and what they might mean for the future of our college and the way that we educate students. So I hope this evening proves as a great kickoff for a conversation that's important to us on a variety of levels and will give us an opportunity to really exercise the very best of the liberal arts in thinking together, thinking in the round about complex problems. And so I want to begin this evening by just extending a very special word of thanks to all of those who have agreed to speak on the program. We have a nice lineup tomorrow of faculty and students and others who will be presenting and sharing ideas about their experience with and perspectives on technology and its effect on our lives. I want to thank those. And I also want to thank those who've been a part of planning this very special event over the last several months. There's a list of those who served on the planning committee in the back of the material that was handed to you this evening. I would encourage you to take a look at the names, and if you have an opportunity and see those individuals around, be sure to thank them personally for the time that they have spent in preparing for the Critical Issues Symposium. I want to extend a special word of thanks to our co-chairs, Derek Emerson, Director of our Office of Events and Conferences, and Alfredo Gonzalez, our Dean for International and Multicultural Education. And so at this time, if you would join me in thanking the members of the committee and the chairs as Alfredo Gonzalez comes to tell you a little bit more about the program and to introduce our speaker for the evening.
Thank you so very much for joining us at the opening keynote address for the Critical Issues Symposium 2014. Let me just offer a few set of instructions, if you will, about the next day or so, but also about the program. If you have a copy, let me just encourage you to keep that in the spirit of being responsible and being more green on our campus. If you took one of these, bring it back tomorrow so that we can continue to use this as the day unfolds for us tomorrow. Secondly, if you have a phone, put it on silent mode. And since this lecture is about technology, we invite you to continue the conversation on social media by using the hashtag HopeCIS when you post something about the symposium on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. And the hashtag is right in the front of your book, so it's right there. And then I think I want to remind you that following the presentation by our speaker, there will be a question and answer period. I will come down and I will have the microphone, and I will look like a television host trying to run across the chapel trying to take questions, and I would prefer to take the questions from students first. So be thinking about the kind of questions you want to ask our speaker. Tomorrow morning we will have after the question and answer period, we're going to go right across into the SCOP Science Center, where we will have a reception for Professor Rushkoff. He will be there to greet you and to sign books, and so we invite you to continue that conversation with him when the program is done. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we will have Professor Gloria Mark present the second major program for us during this year's CIS. Afterwards, we invite you to walk with us over to the Knickerbocker Theater, where we will have some coffee stations ready to serve you so that we can begin the 10:30 conversation of our TEDx style talks by our speakers, by our students, and also by Dr. John Knapp. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. Professor Rushkoff, as you can read in the biographical sketch found in your program, is a futurist, a well-published author, an expert in media and society. His book, Present Shock, When Everything Happens Now, offers insightful understandings of our culture and the impact of technology in our lives. And I mean in every facet of our lives, from what we do at work, how we communicate with family, how we plan our retirement programs, how we live our lives really on a daily basis. Seemingly, all of these sections are taking place all at once. We live in a connected culture. Each day, across the world, 182 billion emails will be sent and received by people like us in this very room, to people who may be in other parts of the world, perhaps in a very isolated part in Kenya, with someone who may be a cattle driver, who may be in conversation with a relative or a friend in Nairobi, hundreds of miles from where they're located. This is very present in our lives. If you were to look at Facebook, for example, it has 100.3 billion people who speak more than 70 languages daily taking part in that program. And so this idea of the impact of technology in our lives is something that is very real. I am delighted that today Professor Rushkoff has agreed to be with us. He told me earlier this evening that he had resisted taking any speaking engagement this year until this one came across his desk. He said, this is one that I need to be part of this conversation because this is a conversation that is not taking place in our nation. So we are delighted that he's here. In his book, The Present Shock, he says the following: narrativity and goals are surrender to a skewed notion of the real and the immediate. The tweet, the status update, what we are doing at any given moment becomes all important, which is behavioristically doomed. For this desperate approach to time is at once flawed and narcissistic. When now is important, the now I just live now, or the one that I am at this particular moment. Would you please help me to welcome Professor Rushkoff as he presents a lecture for us that will help us to understand this notion of the complexity of technology as we try to step into this idea of our human being. His lecture is entitled, Who is on Team Human? Programming the Future with People in Mind. Please help me to welcome Professor Rushkoff.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to open this thing. It's an honor to see all your faces in this room together. It's a presence of humans that we don't get that much anymore. I feel like I'm alone doing email most of the time. What I have to share is actually really easy to get. I think it might be hard to live seeing things this way, but it's really a really easy point to get. And when it hit me most clearly was when I was watching a program in bed with my wife called The Real Housewives of Orange County. Have you guys seen this thing? So, I'm a media theorist, I'm a communications theorist, so I look at everything from the perspective of communications. And what I couldn't figure out week after week was why these women were having so many communications breakdowns. Right? They had the same socioeconomic background, they spoke the same language with the same idioms, they were the same level of wealth, they had the same taste, they dressed the same, they looked the same. Why was this show so much about women who had misunderstandings and then fight. So it was basically they would eat, misunderstand each other, fight, and then sit on separate stools and tell the camera why they fought so much. And I figured it out, and it was really kind of sick. But I realized the reason why they misunderstand each other so much is these women have had so much plastic surgery and so much Botox injected into their faces that they can't make facial expressions that are consonant with the things that they're saying. You know, they're losing the 93% of communication that happens non-verbally is inaccessible to them, right? So one of them, you know, she started a conversation. She said, "Oh, you know, I'm really worried. My daughter's going in for cancer testing tomorrow." And the other one said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." Because she couldn't say it any other way. And then the first one later says to the camera, "Oh, I didn't believe her. She didn't really care." And I realized what this is that this is a misapplication of technology. Right? They're using technology, the technology of Botox, and blessing, you know, it's a great thing. I'm sure people are using it for good. But they're using they're using the Botox in order to try to lock down their face at age 29. And in doing so, they lose access to the time that they're actually in. Right? They want that moment to last so badly that they'll sacrifice the actual time of their life, the moment that they're in. Right? So they're sacrificing life for an idea, and the technology is letting them do this. Right? That this is technology serving a regressive purpose, not a transformative purpose. Right? This is using a new technology, and it's not the newest, latest thing. They're not promoting evolution or change. They're using technology to lock down some really sick regressive values about what matters in a person's life. And I think that the key to seeing this, or for me anyway, the key has been, you know, it was understood really by the ancient Greeks in their understanding of time, which is really the one thing humans have, is time while we're human. We live in time. But they had two different words for time. Right? They had one word for time, which is the time we know about, you know, chronos. And that's the time of the clock. You know, what time did you crash the car? I crashed the car at 4:01. Right? That's chronos. But they had this other word for time, which was kairos. And kairos is a kind of time that it's K-A-I-R-O-S. People write. At least that's how we usually write it. That kairos is human time. It's sort of a readiness time. You know, you crashed the car at 4:01. What time do you tell Dad that you crashed the car? Right, 4:17? No, you tell him after he's had his drink and before he's opened the bills. Right? It's the kind of time that only a human being can understand. Kairos. So what the Botox ladies did, right, was they surrendered kairos to chronos. They wanted to lock down time, the clock at a certain moment, and then they lost access to human time. And I feel like that's what we're doing for the most part with our digital technology. And that's the danger that we're facing right now, is dehumanizing ourselves by pulling ourselves out of the time of our lives and accepting this sort of booby prize of a numerical value, of really locking down time. If you think about, well, you weren't around, most of you, for the early internet, but most of us think of the internet as this thing that goes very fast while humans go slow. There's even that movie, Her, where the Scarlett Johansson character, she's an artificial intelligence. She's like, "Oh, we're just so fast, we can't." You're just in the spaces between our thoughts. Technology is not faster than people. Technology does not live in time. Technology is asynchronous. Technology is a step after a step after a step after a step. In the early internet days, we understood this. We had these things called bulletin boards. And the way a bulletin board service would work online is you would turn on your computer, right? You would plug it into something called a modem, and a modem, are you around for modems? Modems would dial a server through your telephone. It would dial into a server, you would hear like fax sounds, and then your computer would be connected to the server. You would download the conversation that had happened, then you would disconnect from the server. You would unplug and you would read the conversation. You'd read, maybe you'd spend an hour reading all these different posts to a conversation, and then you would think, how do I want to respond to this conversation? What do I want to say? How do I want to add to it? And you might take an hour, 2 hours, or all night crafting this perfect paragraph or two. And you'd write it, it'd be perfect, then you'd log back in, you'd upload it into the conversation there, and you'd wait a day or two to see how people reacted to it. It was like chess by mail. But what we were doing was exploiting the asynchronous bias of this technology, of a technology that goes step by step by step by step, a technology that's in code, that's not living in real time, but is just performing cycles. And the beauty of that was how smart we sounded. You read one of those conversations because people were taking 10 hours of work and compressing that into one brilliant paragraph. Everybody sounded like Christopher Hitchens. And the internet that I grew up with was a place where people sounded smarter than they do in real life. Imagine that. The internet is a place where people sound smarter than they do in real life because they exploited the asynchronous bias of it. But what happened? What happened was really, the market happened. The problem was that in the average internet-connected home in 1995, people were watching 9 hours less commercial television a week. This was a problem. The internet was looked at as this drain on profitability, this thing that could kill the economy if we weren't careful, because people would go online, they would just talk to each other. They were sharing ideas. They weren't buying anything. They weren't selling anything. They were just talking, they were engaging, they were getting smart, they were turning Marxist, for God's sake. It was awful. AT&T, they wanted to give AT&T the internet, and they turned it down. They didn't want it. So what are we going to do with that? No way to make money with that thing. This was by the late 1980s when the stock market was in real trouble because there was a biotechnology boom and a biotechnology bust in 1987. And people were concerned now that the economy might not come back, that we were in a new normal of badness, which we may be. That's another story. But the internet seemed like it might just be able to save us if we can convince people that the internet is a good new technological investment opportunity. So the internet went from being a place where people got to spend all this time thinking, all this time dedicated to higher pursuits and new levels of connectivity with people they'd never met in other countries. It became a way, this kind of a poster child for the NASDAQ stock exchange. Like, here's the way we're going to make money. Right? Colonialism might be over. We might have run out of, continents far away where we can enslave or hurt people and take their stuff. There's no more banana republics, no more of that. The economy can't grow anymore in these sort of mean ways that we've been used to, but we have a new territory. If people are on the internet, now we have a new space to expand, and that space is going to be human attention. Wired magazine announced that we're no longer living in the regular economy, now we're in something called the attention economy. Because human attention was the only limited thing in this new room, this new infinite internet surface area. And they called human attention, they had a metric for it, they called it eyeball hours. Isn't that an interesting metric? So what they wanted to do was maximize the number of eyeball hours people would spend on a site. And then they had people, instead of search engine optimization, which they talk about now, they had people who would enhance your website's stickiness. That was the word they used, stickiness. Because if your website is sticky, then people will get stuck and spend more eyeball hours on your site. The development of our internet technologies over the last 20 years, even our cell phone technologies, have all been about that, have all been about this new commodity of time, of human time. The more human time they can get, you spending time on these devices, the more data they can get, the more money they can get, the more they can argue they have a stock that's worth some value. So we turn this technology into something that used to be an expanse of time into this always-on device strapped onto your body that vibrates or pings you every time somebody has updated their Facebook page or tweeted about something that you heard about or wants to just tap you or poke you or this you or Instagram you. You're getting pinged with the frequency of a 911 operator or an air traffic controller. And you are living in a state of really constant emergency interruption that's disrupting anything like human flow. Oh, it's an emergency. I mean, back in the day, when I was a kid, the only time you would get interrupted was someone would cut in on, remember when you would have a phone call, it was before call waiting, someone would break into your phone call, the operator would break in because grandma's dying. It was usually that, basically. Grandma's sick. Grandma's dying. So they would cut in. Oh, excuse me. So we have an emergency cut in. But now everything's an emergency. You're living in a state of constant emergency. And at least air traffic controllers and 911 operators had medication to take. Or they did it 4 hours a day and then got a break. We're supposed to live like this when we're on work and when we're off work. No, I'm off work now so I can answer my email. I'm off work so I can check everybody's Pinterest pins. So I think for two reasons, we're at a very interesting time, temporally. We're shifting in the way we understand time. One of them is because of this. One of them is because we're really using our digital technologies to amplify this sort of the need to interrupt us and extract money from us. And the other is because the century turned, the millennium turned, and we made it, and nothing really happened. The end of the 90s, there was actually a book in the 70s that I felt really came true in the 90s. It was called Future Shock. In the 1990s, everybody was leaning forward to the millennium. It was all about what's going to happen next. All the book titles were the next this, the coming this, the end of that, the future of this. Everybody was speculating. The dot-com boom was booming. We were all leaning in towards this thing. We thought that there was going to be a Y2K bug in our computers when they weren't going to make it from the 1990s to the 2000s. And they thought planes were going to fall out of the sky. KLM grounded its entire fleet on New Year's Eve because they were concerned that planes were just going to fall out of the sky because their computers were going to break. We had the harmonic convergence. We just had 2012. Everybody was expecting this thing to happen when we moved from 1999 into 2000, and then nothing really happened. People went from being future-leaning to being kind of presentist. They started to look and say, well, wait a minute. It's not what are my stocks going to be worth in this day in the future. It's like, what are they worth right now? What's actually happening now? And when people do that, it's dangerous. What happens now? The stock market crashed in February 2000, February and March, because people were like, well, wait a minute. What is this? Dogs.com? What is this worth? What is this thing? It's nothing. So this sort of leaning forward became a standing still, which is where we are. What is this? What is this about? Why are we here? What's going on? And on the one hand, we have that. And on the other hand, we have all of our digital devices trying to keep this kind of, corporate capitalist model going. This weird chasing its tail thing. Where, we're going to get this many users on this so that a stock value can go to that, and this many users on. None of these companies are really making any money, right? They're converting money into share prices, but they don't make money in a real old-fashioned way where they charge you for something and take money. No, they make money by having their stock go up. And their stock goes up because people think they're worth something, and people think they're worth something because they happen to be everywhere. These are not businesses in the traditional sense of the word. So time, in a sense, both because of what we're doing with technology and because of this turn of the millennium, this weird historical moment we're in and all the discontinuities of 9/11 or 9/11 happening, we end up in what I'm calling the state of present shock. this confusion of kairos and chronos, this inability to really seize our time and to use our time and technology for human purposes. And there's really a few different ways of looking at present shock. The easiest one to understand is what I call narrative collapse. Right? When you no longer have linear time, when you no longer have this sense of time that we used to have, sort of the great timescape of the analog clock, you get what I call narrative collapse. The story just stops working. You know, the stories that Joseph Campbell talked about, the hero's journeys that have organized all of our religions and all of our myths, the idea of following some hero through this arduous task, and he gets to the crisis and the climax, and then rest, then catharsis. That whole journey doesn't really work if you've got a remote control constantly changing channels, right? Once you get to the hard part of that journey, it's like, oh, I don't want to go through that. Boom, I'm gone. You know, and advertisers exploited that little journey, this beginning, middle, end, crisis, climax, relief, just ad infinitum. Every 30-second commercial is just some nightmarish, epic tragedy. Right? Oh, the girl is about to go to the prom, and she finds out she's got a terrible zit. You know, oh no, we're 10 seconds into the commercial, 12 seconds, she tries popping it, and it gets worse. Then she puts on this other horrible stuff, and it gets all infected. And finally, 23 seconds into the commercial, Oxy 5. She puts on, and the psychedelic colors go through her body, and the thing is solved, and she gets to go to the prom. Happy, ding dong, boys here. It's 30 seconds of really media abuse, but it's using the traditional narrative arc. Right? With the remote control, you're no longer victimized by that. If my dad's watching that commercial, he's sitting in his lazy boy chair with his popcorn on his lap in 1950, if he sees that he's about to be abused by a commercial, oh no, there's that girl, oh no, she's going to pop the zit, he wants to change the channel, he's got to take the popcorn off his lap, pull up the chair, walk all the way up to the television, turn this thing called, there was a dial on a television, to turn the channel, adjust these things called rabbit ears to get the next channel in, and then sit back down. Right? So it's 40 calories of human effort to get out of this imposed state of tension. But the remote control as an interactive device changes that. Now, 0.0001 calories of effort, and you're gone. Right? So now you're no longer watching television, now you're watching the television. Right? It's become a cool medium if you're McLuhan people. It becomes cooler now, because now I can participate. Now I can just move from thing to thing to thing. And as we look at all of these deconstructing devices, whether it's the remote control deconstructing the content, or the joystick sort of demystifying the pixels of the television, or the computer mouse now letting us use the TV as a monitor through which we can express ourselves, we're just taking the thing apart and putting it back together ourselves. So these narratives, these imposed narratives, don't really work anymore. We don't watch a show like The Simpsons wondering, will Homer get out of the power plant before it blows up? No, we're just watching satire. What are they making fun of here? Is that a Hitchcock movie? Is that a commercial? Is that a this? We get our enjoyment not making it to the end, but drawing connections as we go through. And the kinds of television we watch now that were made for this medium, for this more deconstructed medium, are like Game of Thrones. You ever watch Game of Thrones? This is a show that's not a show with a beginning, middle, and an end. Game of Thrones is much more like a fantasy role-playing game. It's like Dungeons and Dragons. They open the game. You watch the opening, what do? They pan over a map as if it's the playing board of a game. Because it's not about getting to the end. The Game of Thrones is about the intrigue. It's more like, in some ways, it's more like a soap opera. It's about how are things playing out in a moment-to-moment way. It's complex and it has so many characters. There's no protagonist in Game of Thrones. Maybe Little Dinklage, but not really. Right? It's a weird ensemble, ongoing thing. Or look at that, the user habit, the viewer habit of House of Cards. Or is that, yeah, House of Cards, the Netflix show. House of Cards, because we all watch it in our own time. They put the whole season there at once, so now we can watch it in our own time. So we don't get this collective effect anymore. I can't go to work and say, oh, did you see last night's House of Cards? No, I'm just like a walking spoiler if I've watched the whole thing, so we're all remaining silent. It's like can I talk about the season? No, I can't, because who's still got to watch that and wants to, right? So I can't say what happened for those of you who know. Wink, wink, nudge. It's like, what? So it's very fractious now, right? Television, instead of being something that we're all seeing together, now each of us is seeing our own little TV thing. Really what's happening is the narrative quality of the story is changing into this really more interactive or post-narrative, this narrative collapsed form of the video game. Instead of watching a character make a series of choices and get into trouble and then get redeemed, now we make the choices ourselves. A video game is a way of moving from choice to choice to choice to choice to choice. You know, it's the way in some, I don't know if they do this anymore, in Christian youth. They took the emphasis off telling the story of Jesus and put it on what? What would Jesus do? What is that transition about? It's about moving from a narrative sensibility to a real-time choice sensibility, one that's in the moment to moment to moment. Now, on the most positive side, from my perspective, it gets us out of the closed-ended games of traditional narrative. Just follow us up this thing and then we'll win. This sort of eyes on the prize, ends justify the means. You know, the thing that characterized every bad ism of the 20th century is always, just do this one hard part and then it'll be okay. You know, and usually doing that hard part meant like killing lots of people or doing something just awful. You know, that we end up instead not looking to win the game. You don't play a fantasy role-playing game in order to win, because winning ends the play. You play a fantasy role-playing game, the object is to keep the game going as long as you can, which is much better kind of game to be playing in a world that seems hell-bent on figuring out how to end itself. You know, the characteristic of moving from choice to choice to choice to choice is what living in a digital media environment is like. And that's what we're doing. We're living in a digital media environment. And that's what it always is. It's choice. You get more choices. I have another device. I can download this device or that one. I can download this app or that thing. I can do this or that. Now I have a choice to be in this room with you or to text with my daughter over here. It's like you're just getting more and more choices and being forced to choose. Oh, wait a minute, it just vibrated. Choice is good, right? More choice is good. We're in a democracy. We want more choice. Right? But I don't want to be forced to even have to make a choice. Right? I'm with you. The reason I turn off the ringer is not to be polite. It's so that I'm not interrupted by the choice itself. Right? That's what's so fractious about it. But it's what brings me to the kind of second feature of present shock, the second sort of syndrome I'd want to share with you. That's what I'm calling digiphrenia. You know, and digiphrenia is the real, I'm sure you'll be talking more about these kinds of effects tomorrow, but it's really what happens when we misapply technology. You look at a computer processor. Computer processor does lots of things at once. That's what they're good at. They have memory in different parts. They have a little central part, and they send out tasks. Right? You give it a set of problems. It goes, you do this, while you do that, while you do that, while you do that, and I'll sit here and wait for the pieces, okay, and put them together. A human being can't do that. A human being can't do parallel processing. A human being can do this, then this, then this, then that. Or you can do this, then that, this, then that, this, then that, but you can't do this and that. You really can't. However much you want to believe you can. All the experiments done at Stanford with the smartest, greatest little computer-using students would look at having them single task, having them multitask. Invariably, the students who multitask thought they did better. They thought they understood more. They thought they had greater accuracy. And inevitably, the ones who multitasked did it slower, with less accuracy, less retention, less depth. Always. Even though the subjective experience was of getting more things done. What digital technology tells us, or at least the sellers of digital technology, is that we can do more than one thing at a time. That we can do both. You know, but we can't. So we end up, when we try to do both, we end up with more than one instance of ourselves coexisting simultaneously online. And that's weird. Your inbox is filling while your Twitter feed is going, while Mark Zuckerberg is saying something in your name on Facebook that you don't even know about. Every time you go to sleep, your online identities are still there. Things are happening that you wake up, the reason you check is because you don't know what they were doing while you were asleep. So we end up in this in a stressful state, what I'm calling digiphrenia, which is trying to be in more than one place at the same time. I came up with it when I was spending time with the drone pilots out in Nevada, and I found out that drone pilots have higher rates of PTSD than pilots who are in actual planes. And that seemed shocking to me because they're not even in the war zone. Then I realized why they're having such high rates of PTSD. It's because during the day they're sitting in an airplane hangar in Nevada using drones and blowing people up. And it's 5 o'clock, they get in the car, drive home, talk to the second grader about how was school today, honey. Those are two lives that aren't together, that can't quite match up. At least the pilots in the real war zone, they go into a bar with other pilots at night. At least they're there. But to be there and here at the same time is strange. What we're starting to find out, if we push through it onto the, push through it to the next level, what we're starting to learn, even neurochemically, I'd be interested to talk to the biologists here, is that there are many clocks inside a real person. That rather than conforming to digital time and trying to do all this, we could start to look at what is human time. And one researcher I've been working with has been finding out that human beings have a natural lunar cycle. Not just women, but men. Everybody have a lunar cycle. In the first week of a new moon, we tend to be dominated by acetylcholine. In the second week, we tend to be dominated by serotonin. In the third week, dopamine. In the fourth week, norepinephrine. Well, what does that mean if we're all going through an acetylcholine phase and then a serotonin phase? It means our whole mood as people is changing. If you start to notice these things, as ancient cultures did, as people who even can just see the moon do, you start to say, wow, this is acetylcholine week. It's the first week I'm really good at meeting people and I'm kind of peppy. It's the second week, a serotonin week. I'm getting a lot done. It's dopamine week. No wonder I can't study. It's dopamine. This is party week. I should be skiing, going nuts. Right? If we were listening to our bodies rather than trying to make them conform. Time is not generic, no matter what our digital technologies will tell us. And there's others. There's 2 or 3 other sort of main features. One of them I call overwinding, which is the tendency to try to push really long time frames into really short ones. It sort of came, this guy Stuart Brand wrote a book called The Long Now, and I realized that in The Long Now he wanted people to think of things in sort of 10,000-year cycles rather than always so short. But I have a real problem with that, because then I'll think like, okay, here's this plastic bottle, right? And I've got to throw it out when I'm done, and there's not a recycling bin here. And I'm not now I'm stuck in this kind of short forever of guilt, worrying about the 10,000-year impact of every little thing I do. It's overwinding, is sort of compressing the responsibility of huge moments of time into little ones. It's what happens when we take Black Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving, and we decided now that we're going to have Black Friday sales start Thursday or maybe Wednesday at midnight, like before Thanksgiving, because they're compressing like now the whole economy, the shopping value of 2 years into one pre-Christmas moment. And that's why you see them coming into Walmart and running each other over and people dying. So that's great. Or the stock market is a great example of overwinding, where in the old days, the way the stock market worked was people would buy a stock, they buy shares of a stock, and then you'd wait some number of years and hope that the value went up. But that's not the way it works anymore. Now people buy the stock and they want it to make money on it now, somehow in the trade itself. That's why people bought Facebook on the first day it was there and the stock went, wait a minute, it didn't go up. It was supposed to go, I just bought it. I thought this was an up stock. It's like, it takes some time. For people that aren't patient enough to do that, we have these things called derivatives. Right? So that's where instead of buying the stock now, you buy the stock 30 days from now or 60 days from now, but you're buying it now. So you're compressing all that time into here. Right? But now if you're not satisfied with that, you could buy the derivative of a derivative. So now you're buying a future on a future and compress another 60 days on it, or a future of that, or a future of that. But when you're buying that future of that future of that future, what the traders don't realize is there's an algorithm on an ultra-fast trading machine buying that future of a future of a future before they get there and then selling it to them for a profit. Right? That's overwinding. And it's not about promoting or helping human markets. It's not about capitalizing a new business. That's not what the stock, it's about making money off nothing. If anything, it's about trying to squeeze humans for money. Because people don't make money on these systems anymore. 99% of the trading is machines trading with machines. Now, when I talk with my peers about this, they believe I'm crazy. Which may be true, but is beside the point. Most of my peers think that these are not really problems and shouldn't be of our concern, because the moment is coming very, very shortly when computers will be so complex that they'll be so good at what they do that they will be smarter than people, which they may be, but that they will be able to think for themselves. That's what they call the singularity, the moment when technology becomes conscious and surpasses humans. And that once technology does that, human beings are really only important insofar as we can keep the technology going. So Douglas, they tell me, don't worry about the global warming and all these other kinds of problems, because the computers won't be bothered by that. Cyborgs don't need a good biosphere. They'll figure things out. And we'll be able to upload your consciousness to there, or something like it, or at least what you knew, into some big, wonderful Wikipedia there. And that, to me, is a self-loathing view of technology. The theory basically goes that information has been in a very long evolution towards greater states of complexity. That the whole story of the universe is information trying to get more complex. So first we have atoms, then we have molecules, then we have cells, then we have organisms, then we have people and civilization, and our civilization made computers, and then computers will go on. Like Scarlett Johansson in that movie, they will surpass us. But to think that information is on its own quest towards greater states of complexity, to me that has the medium and the message reversed. Information doesn't exist without humans to behold it, without humans to make sense of it. If you're not making sense of it, then it's no longer information, it's just stuff. It's just stuff. And then I look in popular culture and I see the same kind of human loathing view of the future. Like everyone, I watch a lot of these zombie shows. Zombie shows are interesting, right? What are zombie shows really saying? The real question of a zombie show, it's funny, zombie shows they're in some ways a utopian fantasy. When people live these really complex lives, look at a zombie life. You live in a world of zombies. It's like, well, okay, so you got your family, you're on a hilltop, you got a shotgun, there's no Twitter feed, there's no boss, there's no cell phone interruptions, there's no bills to pay, there's just a few slow-moving zombies on the horizon. You pick them off. People fantasize that. They're going to keep the food in the basement of the house. It's not with fear that they fantasize, but with a little bit of hope. But it is. But the real theme of every zombie movie and every zombie show is what makes us different from zombies. They're all basically saying, it's really hard to see, isn't it? Look at that zombie out there. He's just trying to survive. He's killing to eat like we kill to eat. Kills people to eat, but sometimes we kill people too. Zombie person. But trying to convince ourselves that we're no better than zombies is also human loathing. It's an inability to see, and I don't mean to get, religious on y'all, but it's an inability to see the sanctity of human life, the specialness of human life. I shouldn't have to prove human life is special in order for us to accept that as a given, that human beings are special. But this anti-human vibe, and this is where it gets dark, this anti-human vibe of both technologists and zombie people, it dovetails just a little bit too conveniently with industrial age corporate capitalism, with the industrial age kind of capitalism that we're trying to keep alive with digital technology, but we should let go on its way and start doing way more fun things. What was industrialism about, really? Why did we start with machines and processes to make our stuff? Really, it's because you could pay people less if they're an industrial model. That's really what it was about. Back in the late Middle Ages, we had a crafts society. It looked something like Burning Man or Etsy. People knew how to make stuff and they traded it. It was after the Crusades, people had local currencies. They actually started to get really wealthy in the late Middle Ages. Feudalism was waning. People were getting wealthy. We had a rise of these people called burghers, the middle class. Oh no, the middle class, here they come. People were getting wealthy and the aristocracy was getting poorer because the aristocracy didn't work. They just knew how to make money by having money. So these families that hadn't worked in 10 centuries were panicking. Right? There was no wealth for the rich. So they invented really two things. One thing they invented was the chartered corporation, the chartered monopoly. What the chartered monopoly said was no one's allowed to do business in this industry except my friend Joe. So if you want to be a shoemaker, you got to work for Joe. Oh, you want to be an oat miller, you got to work for Sarah because she's the oat mill monopoly. And we had the series of monopolies that the aristocracy got shares in, and everybody went from being craftspeople who made stuff themselves to being employees of companies. So instead of selling their stuff, what did they sell? They sold their time. And so when we started to get the time on the tower in the middle of every town, because now people could sell their hours, their humanity, their life, rather than their value. Rather than the value they created, they're selling their actual human time. But if you run one of these companies, if you're a shoe company, you want great shoemakers in your company? You think, oh sure. You don't want great shoemakers in your company. If you have great, talented shoemakers in your company, they're going to want high wages. They're going to complain if they have bad conditions. What you want is to go to the Home Depot parking lot and get people you can get for $4 an hour. And they went to the equivalent of their Home Depot parking lot and got the illegal immigrants of their day and brought them in and paid them almost nothing. And all you need to be able to do that is to have one good shoemaker there who can say, okay, you guys hammer this little nail in. You guys cut this little piece like that. And you guys do this. So each person could be trained in 15 minutes. They're replaceable. They complain, they're gone. Right? Industrialism was always about removing the worker, removing the human from the equation. You remove the worker that way. How do you remove the human from the other side, from the consumer side? Advertising and public relations. We have to get people, this is what Eisenhower, everyone talked about. We have to get people not to buy what they need, but to buy what we need to sell in order to keep the economy going. So we have advertising and public relations really to remove the human from the consumer. And then you can look at the history of technology since then as ways of removing human artifacts, human participation from either the consumer side or from the production side. We had the Great Exhibition in Victorian England. It was like the first World's Fair. And the interesting thing about the Great Exhibition in the 1890s, Queen Victoria did it. It was about all the great things England was doing and getting from around the world. They would have a giant display of a weaving loom, of a mechanical weaving loom that is now being used in India. They don't show the person working the loom. They don't show the laborer who's actually, getting their fingers cut off in this loom, or the laborers who've been displaced. They show the loom, and then they show the great fabrics. And what made a fabric valuable at that time was there was no evidence of human craftsmanship. It was pure. There's no human, right? Because the human is a little knot that some person, the kind of thing that we would value today. Oh, look, it's an individually hand-sewn. Oh, no. Machine sewn. No humans. Or think of the dumbwaiter. We like to think of Thomas Jefferson invented the dumbwaiter, this little, a little elevator in your house, and you think, oh, wasn't that a nice thing? So his slaves didn't have to walk up 3 flights of stairs with the food to bring it to him. They just stuck it in this thing, and then he pulled the crank, and then out it came. He didn't invent it so they didn't have to walk up the stairs. You invent the dumbwaiter so that you don't have to see the servants, so the food just comes, right? You don't have to see the sweating people who are making this stuff. Or look at the modern equivalents of these. So when we have the great exhibition in Victorian times. We have CES, the Computer Electronics Show, or the Apple World Convention today. And we see these great little devices, these beautiful things. And we're not looking at the little kids in Africa who are out getting the molybdenum to stick in the rechargeable battery. No, we're just looking at the device. That's why Steve Jobs used to just say, "Isn't it incredible?" It's incredible. It's never about, look what we've done, look what these people did, look what this creative person did, look at what this kid did by mining this metal for you to stick it in your phone. Now, he's not the one that's featured there. Or the equivalent of the dumbwaiter. Amazon is buying, they think they bought a drone company. That's to make sure, let's get the last human being out of this. We got robots in the warehouse. There's still these UPS guys that are getting paid. What if we just use drones to get things to people? Or Amazon Turks is what? Instead of people using computers, it's computers using people. Amazon Turks is an employment platform where you go, you sign in, and you can get paid like, a nickel to identify a sign or do some task looking at it that a computer can't do. So computers dole out these tasks that they can't do, sort of simple logical things, and people do it for them. So people are doing the most boring part, and computers are doing the actual thinking. You look at advertising. We saw how advertising is about trying to create demand out of people. Now we use computers to recommend to us what we want next. But if you're on Facebook, you are getting ads that its big data engines are using. They're analyzing your past in order to bring you the future that you didn't yet know you want to live. Your future is careening. It's funny because your past is careening up, right? There's people from second grade who you thought you'd gotten rid of who now try to friend you, right? So you got your past coming up, but you've got your future careening towards you, and it's not your future. It's just one probable future, but it's the one that they can monetize the best. So all of the strange, anomalous behaviors and possibilities that a person might live, all of the strange choices you might make that are less marketable, get sort of rooted out. If they see, there's a 60% chance this person's going to go on a diet, all of a sudden, all the ads, hey, you think you're a little fat lately? All of a sudden, your whole world's going to be telling you you're fat because that's where they know they might be able to get you to go. To reify the chartered monopolies of the 13th century, we have what are called now the platform monopolies of the internet. A company like Uber, which is the car company, or you get your cars, they have to own the entire car industry to be successful, because only if they have the whole thing can they leverage it into something else. Amazon can't just be a product company. They also are trying to become the search company and the TV company. Everyone needs to become everything, because if you are not the big winner of the game, then you're nothing. That's what everybody's finding out in a little way who tries to make software or write a book or do anything and sell it online. There's this thing called the long tail, where there's just a few people who really, really make it, and then this long, long tail of people who make nothing. We thought the internet would be democratizing because now people were going to get to, anyone could publish music, anyone can make a video, anyone can do anything. And on the one hand, that's true, but we're doing it on these platforms that reinforce the divide. We have fewer successful pop stars today than we did 20 years ago. The division of wealth between the biggest winners and the losers is magnified, not made even. The playing field has gotten, if anything, more stacked away from us rather than towards us. What we're doing is really using the net as an economic engine to take money away from, and cash and value away from all these activities that people might do in a peer-to-peer fashion, and turn it into stock value, where it sits worthlessly, actually. People don't know what to do with it. They got stocks coming out their ears. There's all this money, but there's no, how do we spend it? What do we do? So I argue, why don't we start looking at how we can use technology and digital technology to serve humans? To do stuff that actually connects us to one another, that gives us more time rather than less time, that lets us work 30-hour weeks instead of 40. If we have such an unemployment problem, maybe we look at unemployment as the goal rather than as the problem. If we really don't need all this work of people, then maybe let people work less. Oh my God, how could you say that? It's been a 40-hour week as long as I can remember. The Singularity people argue that for me to promote a human-centric use of technology is hubris. That's what they called it, hubris. One of them, who shall remain nameless but is famous, said, oh, Rushkoff, you just say that because you're a human. I was like, yeah, yes, I'm a human. I am on Team Human. That's why I named the talk that. I figured you guys would understand what I mean. Yes, I am on Team Human. And that does not mean that I am regressive about technology. I can be on Team Human. They're the regressive ones. I am the progressive one. They're the ones who are reactionary, using technology to preserve the inequities of colonial corporatism. They're like the Botox ladies, using the Botox to lock down a moment in history, rather than using our technologies to enhance the moment we're in. I'm asking that we think beyond their unacknowledged model. We can transcend we have to transcend this very limited notion of prosperity before we start talking about transcending humanity itself. So yeah, let's use this opportunity to actually speak with each other a little bit, because we're live in the room. You could always watch me in a video or something. But if we're here, maybe we should interact a bit. I said I wasn't going to do anything this year, and then when I saw this technology and the future of being human, I realized there's someone who wants to actually talk about this. There's all these digital humanities programs all over the place. They're not talking about it. Digital humanities is like looking at hypertext art or something. It's not digital humanism, which is the conversation that we need to have. I don't think that we're at war with technology at all, but I think we are in a kind of a war with some of the people who are using technology, with some of the people who are developing it blind to their power, blind to the fact that they're spending their entire day really just trying to help a company's share price go up and not realizing all what that means. So do you guys have thoughts, questions? I know it's sometimes hard, especially if you're in a whole big thing, but anyone has a thought or a question or something they want to talk about?
Hello, my name is Andrew Peacher, and I'd just like to thank you first off for the great talk.
Oh, thanks.
And when you're...
Thanks, I should end.
And I was wondering, when you're talking with colleagues about what is a progressive or a regressive use of technology, when we use technology as a means to an end, what are we saying about the value of these means and ends? What is common ground that you guys speak on to define progressive and regressive?
Me or them, or either?
Together, in those conversations.
Well, in most of those conversations, they consider progress to be our ability to quantify the seemingly unquantifiable. So let's get the fuel band on the person and the monitor this and monitor that. That the drive, well, certainly the Google Drive, is to translate everything about reality to its informational component. And once we've done that, then, in a sense, the map can replace the territory. Just make sure you get everything before you close the door behind you. And what someone like me or, say, Jaron Lanier will argue is that the more you do that, the more that the thing that is actually special about humans kind of slips away like a tomato seed under your finger. That there's something quirky and strange and just weird about people that you won't figure out. But if you deny that exists, if you don't give it sort of room to respirate a little bit, then we end up cutting ourselves off from all these different things that we didn't realize we had. Right? So I look at kids who are growing up with their faces in the screens, and a lot of them have trouble making eye contact. You know, and the problem with not being able to make eye contact is there's this part of your brain that are called mirror neurons, and mirror neurons respond to positive reinforcement from another person. So it's called getting rapport. So, you know, you start to breathe together and you nod together, and someone's pupils actually get larger when they're accepting what you're saying, and they kind of dart small if you say something that's strange to them. If you can't see that, then you can't form rapport with that person. And what you're then doing is denying however many 100,000 years of evolution that have gotten humans to where we are, and just in one moment. And then what you've done, if you've done that and you take away 60, 70, 80% of all the stuff that humans used to use to orient and to know what's going on, truth from fiction, you know, friend from foe, safe from dangerous, now we're disempowered. Now we've got to depend on these weird signs, you know, oh, that banner ad says good, or this word says, now we're using artificial constructions and symbols to navigate through our world. What they would say is it's a linguistic problem. Just keep pumping it up, keep getting more data, keep doing more, and we will get there, right? And I think it's not just a fruitless journey. It's a way of, in our society, it's a way of feeding information to companies while taking information away from you. You know, as you use computers, as you use Facebook, Facebook learns more about you. But are you learning more about it? No, we know less and less about Facebook's algorithms and experiments every single day. Right? Most kids think Facebook is there to help them make friends. You know, and we know it's not there to help them make friends. It's there to monetize little Johnny's social graph. So it's sort of, I guess, that's sort of my answer.
Yeah, I also have a question. Recently, I've looked at a lot of works that have been done on tribalism and this kind of re-tribalization of our culture through the use of social media and digital interaction to bring together people in ways that wouldn't have been possible before. What do you think about our ability to say, like you talked about time now versus, and the human concept of time, what do you think about how maybe people will be able to, due to the fact that we can organize ourselves in this way, make our lives less about the actual technology itself and more about how humans can interact with each other? Because, our college invited you to come here and speak with us. Don't you think that if enough people are onto this and get into their own opinions and conceptions of what's going on here, and they develop this current, don't you think eventually people will develop alternative forms of interacting with technology, and the world will be able to, you'll see progress, but you'll see it in ways that you can't even expect and classify into groups?
Yeah, but I think you have to realize, hope is the exception and not the rule, right? Unfortunately, this is a special place. This is a mission-driven institution with people who are trying to rise to the occasion of being alive and a human being in the 21st century. You know, and that's it's no small feat to even just decide to do that. And even if we fail, Martian anthropologists come here 1 billion years from now and they'll go, oh, there were people here who got it. There were people here who, worst case, right? Not to be glib. But no, I do think there are tribes. I think there are non-local tribes that you can be a part of, as long as you're very conscious that it's a non-local tribe and that it won't substitute for the local one. And we got to use the technology. Especially if you've got some weird disease or something and there's only 30 other people with it, you connect online and you've got community, right? You get that. But it's a matter of then how do you balance that with the organic real-world community, and how does it let people off the hook? I was asked by a synagogue in New York to consult with them on the impact of virtual Shabbat services on their community. Because if you do Shabbat, but you're supposed to go, right? You go on Saturday and you do a bunch of prayers and stuff. And there are old people who it's really hard for them to get there, and you use teen volunteers, and they go into their apartments and bring them and get them in their little things and get little cubby holes, whatever you do with them, in their canes, and get them there. And it's like, well, if they got to put a computer in their house, now they can just watch it. It's like, yeah, now they can just watch it, but what about the opportunity for service that's being lost to that 14-year-old kid who, I call it, they would say the trip that poor 14-year-old kid has to take every week, but it's the fellowship, it's the bringing people together into that space that we lose the opportunity to care for each other that way. There was a woman when I lived in Brooklyn, there was a woman in the hall who got pregnant, and she had the baby, and she was having some trouble, figuring out how to breastfeed it. And there was an old lady in the same hall who wanted to I'll show you what to do. I had 7, and she did. She went online, she found the lactation consultant, the professional, right, who she could pay to come do it. And I talked with her long after about it, and it's like, was it that strange? Did you really think it was going to be that difficult? She's like, no, but I didn't know if I let her come and do that, then what would we owe her? It's like the opportunity to accept. It's harder for people to accept a favor from a neighbor than it is to do a favor for a neighbor, because if they accept a favor from a neighbor, it creates the beginnings of community and kinship, a tribe, real tribe. And it's those sort of spontaneous moments where we make those decisions where I think tribal bonds are formed. So we can create intentional tribal connections in the easy way with people who we know are like us. But then to try to create them with the people who just happen to be on your path, that's where it gets all biblical. And then I'll be around to answer stuff too. I'll stay in the other room.
Hi. Oh, there we are.
Hey.
All right. So my question concerns the following, which is when companies like Amazon and Facebook start producing low-quality devices that can be mass-produced in just unimaginable quantities and try to connect the entire world, go after continents like Africa, Facebook wanting to bring Facebook to Africa. Is this more of a humanitarian mission to better the lives of people, or is it more a mission to get 1 billion more consumers? And from that I ask, is there in this volatile, kind of just almost libertarian technological economy, is there room for human ethics?
There's not. There's not, but there's not room for their economy in our human world either. You know what I mean? There's room. The issue here is that, and what we're learning is that the corporation has always been a program. That's what it was. It's lines of code written down. We will make money for our shareholders. We will do it like this. This is how much we'll pay our president. It's a code. And so the core code of any corporation is to extract value from people. So you go way back, and they have to. That's the rule. That's what they're for. Dutch East India Trading Company, they come to the islands. They need lots of rope because they're tying things up, and bringing it back. And so the tribes people there, the natives, they start making rope and selling it to the Dutch East India Trading Company. The boat goes back to Holland and says, oh, the tribes people are selling us rope. They say, well, that's not the way a corporation works. New law, it's illegal to make rope in this Dutch East Indies island. The only one who's allowed to make rope is the Dutch East India Trading Company. So they go back, and now the natives have to work for the Dutch East India Company at their wages. It's a program. They had no choice but to do it that way. So now when we take those programs and digitize them, now when we get the smartest but unconscious Stanford engineers to come and write algorithms to execute that corporate program, we end up with these things like almost like viruses or bots running through the economy and just extracting value, looking for every opportunity. Oh, there's cab drivers. Oh, they're making money. Ooh. You know, oh, there's someone else, another, and just suck it out. You know, and it works, right? It works, but the unintended consequence is many of these apps are creating bounty, right? They're creating bounty that we don't quite know how to deal with yet. We're actually living in a world of abundance. Right? We have more places to live than people to live in them. In California, they're burning down houses. Banks are burning down houses that are in foreclosure because they don't want market values to go down. We're destroying food every week because of crop prices. We're actually in abundance. So all we have to do is figure out, well, how can we let that person without a house live in that house? It's like right now he's not allowed to live there. Why? Because he doesn't have a job. Right? But we can't find some plastic thing for him to make that we don't need. So what do we do with him? Well, just don't let him live there. It's like once we start looking at, oh, well, why don't we just think of the economy as a way to provide for people rather than a way to extract value from people, we can write different programs. You know, but that's what it's going to take. And there are some. For every Uber, there's an actual ride-sharing company. You know, for every Airbnb, there's actually a couch surfing service. You know, so for every app that's looking for a way to make a buck off us doing nice things for one another, there's another app or a system that's staying as thin as it possibly can and trying to promote the exchange rather than the extraction.
Well, would you join me in thanking Professor Rushkoff?
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I saw some hands up, and I apologize for not being able to get to those questions. An invitation, if you want to continue the conversation with our speaker, the atrium at the SCOP Center, please come in and join us, and let's have more conversation. And just a reminder, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, let me ask you to come back and join this conversation and continue those questions coming. Thank you so very much. We are adjourned.